Kia ora, Stefano Markie here with a video about continence. Probably not a subject that many people want to dwell on, really. We begin life incontinent, and often we come to the end of our lives incontinent. You know, it's kind of very uncomfortable and unpleasant thing. So why am I talking about it? Well, I'm using it as a starting point to get into something a bit wider. So we do talk briefly about urinary and bowel continence, but you know it's only to set up a kind of a metaphor and an analogy for other more interesting and more interesting topics and more pleasant topics, really. less kind of depressing. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. So that's what we're going to talk about. So you are on the Mark the Demystifier channel. You might be watching this on YouTube, or you might be watching this on my parallel channel on Patreon. If you're watching it on Patreon, thanks for being a Patreon. Patrons are people who volunteer to support the channel financially. So it's like being a business sponsor, but as an individual person. So you can actually help the channels that you like, and help them to promote themselves and get more views and get a higher profile and produce better quality videos. So the channels at the moment, there's some changes on the Patreon. But the channels at the YouTube, this YouTube channel covers a lot of stuff about something called retroactive jealousy, and in fact it's the go-to channel for people who are struggling with this condition or looking for working through recovery for this condition. I haven't actually put that in the name of the channel. Well, maybe we might incorporate it. You know, maybe Mark the Demystifier incorporating retroactive jealousy. So I'm kind of aware I've got kind of two different audiences potentially. So what I try and do is balance what I shoot. So I shoot something on retroactive jealousy, and I shoot something that's for a more general audience, really. So that's kind of the way the channel's going to run at the moment. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. It kind of suits me and the way that I put things out. So things are changing with the Patreon channel. So there is going to be a specialist Patreon channel for retroactive jealousy. That's about to be launched soon. So if you're watching this on Patreon and your interest is in a broad range of things, then stay put. If you're watching this on Patreon and you're purely interested in retroactive jealousy, then you might want to relocate to the new channel. But I'll put some more information out about that. Anyway, so that's all that stuff out of the way, really. Continence. And I'm not talking about continents, as in land masses. I'm talking about continence with a C. There's some people like to put an E, a Y on the end of continence, continency, and things like dependency. So do you say dependence or dependency? Continence or continency? Competence or competency? Codependence or codependency? Personally, I prefer it without the E on the end. I'm going to have to research into what actually is the most accurate, really. The E seems a little bit unnecessary. So continence, continency, if you prefer. If you have strong views around the correct English usage in that respect, let me know. Put something in the contents box. So, okay, continence. Okay, so when we are very young, we have no control of our bowels or our bladders. Okay, and as we grow older, the big challenge is to master that. Okay, and it is a big challenge, but most of us kind of got there, unless there's some medical problem that's causing some difficulties. Particularly difficult things like how do we actually manage continence at night? We do, don't we? For most of us, lots of people struggle with bedwetting, and it kind of makes sense, really. Why wouldn't we? But most people kind of manage to learn urinary continence and bowel continence overnight. Okay, but there's other forms of continence, and interestingly, we learn those all in a kind of parallel process as we get older. It's part of the same maturity process as different kinds of continence. So what I want to do is kind of talk about some of those different kinds of continence. So the first one I want to talk about is emotional continence. Okay, so if you look at the opposite of continence, okay, the opposite of continence is either, so if we take bowels, and I'm sorry about this, it's not a nice analogy, okay, but, either diarrhea, okay, or constipation. They're the kind of two extremes, okay. So, and that works with emotion as well. Okay, so as a psychotherapist, one of the things that I often do is to help people to learn how to regulate emotion. Okay, and people tend to fall into those two extremes. They're either emotionally constipated, they don't allow themselves to feel anything. It's not that necessarily they don't feel, but they will kind of block their awareness of feeling, and be very, not very tuned into feeling, and kind of present in an unresponsive way emotionally, or their emotions are uncontrollable, all over the place. Diarrhea. Okay, so we'll try and leave those images as we go, and hopefully you pick up the kind of gist. So you've got the different forms of continence. So you've got the constricted, and you've got the uncontrolled. Okay, so one of the things that we learn as we get older is management of those things. So if you look at a very young child, falls over, hurts themselves, they'll cry like they're going to die. And some children will stop crying when the pain goes away, and some will continue crying when the pain's long gone. They're still experiencing that sense of distress. So we gradually master that, but we don't necessarily master it that well, actually. I don't think we're great at this, and that's why a lot of people have psychological problems. So we're kind of either completely overwhelmed with things, or we block things off. If we block things off, what happens? I'm sorry, I said I wouldn't go back to these analogies again, but I'm going to have to. If we block, if you look at constipation, have constipation for long enough, then sooner or later you're going to have some kind of eruption, and that happens emotionally. Okay, and people who have experienced breakdowns that seem to come out of the blue, that's often because they've been holding on to lots of stuff emotionally, so things haven't been flowing in the right way. That's what continence is things flowing in the right way. So that's a form of continence. Okay, verbal continence is another one, and I've been very verbally incontinent in this video, babbling. Some people just talk and talk and talk and talk, and there's all kinds of different reasons for that, and some people find it very difficult to talk. They're very closed off, and they find it hard to communicate. So again, continence, it's like learning the appropriate amount of vocalization for the situation. And some people just really don't have that. So I haven't been in a job where I have to assess people. So you have a finite amount of time in which to go through a series of questions with people. Some people, you'd find it very difficult to get the information from them. You'd find it'd be quite difficult to draw them out. You'd have to ask them lots of probably quite direct questions. Was it like this? Was it like that? To get them to open up. And then there are other people that would share so much unnecessary, irrelevant information with me that we couldn't complete what we wanted to do in the session. And it wasn't really a choice. It's a habit. It's a developmental stage that people have got to. So we have to learn a verbal continence. Not kind of just a word salad, just a constant vocalization without really any much kind of awareness of why we're vocalizing, what the effect that vocalization is having on the other person. And the opposite, which is really kind of clammed up, kind of shut down, kind of, very taciturn, very few words. Okay. So the last one, there are more categories. I think this is something that, you could explore endlessly, really. I think most things in life, like things like selfishness, there's a healthy balance point in the middle. To be too selfless is not good. To be too selfish is not good. So there's millions of things that you could apply this kind of model to. Basically you've got the two extremes and the middle point, which you aspire towards or aim to move towards. But the last one I want to cover today is sexual continence. Okay, and this is again another really interesting one. So, and this isn't about kind of any kind of value judgments, okay, apart from where it comes to harm to others, or harm to self, I guess, really. So for some people, they are shut down sexually, They're so uptight that although they might be, they've probably got some sexual interest, they find it very hard to engage in anything sexual, to relax, to experience the sexual side of themselves. That's kind of constricted and shut down. And for some people, excuse me, and for some people, they find it very hard to control their sexual urges, the sexuality is kind of, if you like, it's kind of running riot. It's running them rather than being in charge of their sexuality. The sexuality is driving them. Is the driver for their behaviour. Okay, which can lead to all kinds of troubles. Can lead to sort of high risk behaviours for the individual, putting themselves in dangerous positions. So they might be, assaulted or harmed. It can take the form of predatory, abusive behaviour towards others, because it's not about our sexual orientation. Whatever our sexual orientation, these things still apply. Whether we're heterosexual, homosexual, pansexual, for people that have paedophilic urges, continence is all it's all about the continence. Okay, it's holding that in. So, and that's why some people are predatory and harmful sexually. That's not the picture, obviously. I mean, we're going to talk some more probably about that kind of thing, because that's the field that I'm in at the moment. Sexual harm and stuff like that. And I don't want to kind of make too many. I don't want to get in too much into that really, because that complicates the waters and things really. But just essentially, so on the one extreme, kind of probably wanting a sexual outlet and would, potentially benefiting from a sexual outlet, but being kind of closed off, being constricted, being uptight, not being able to do that. Maybe being sexually aversive. And on the other extreme, so that's the constipation, and then the diarrhea is the sex at any cost. Sex where it puts you at risk, sex where it puts other people at risk, or even sex when it puts other people in harm's way. And that can be different degrees. That can be a sexual abuser that does it on a horrific scale, or it can be serial affairs, or things like that. So I'm not going to get into sex addiction here. We talk about that in some other videos. That's kind of something that fits in a slightly different model. Okay, it doesn't really kind of fit neatly into this model. That's the thing with models. There's a phrase in, I think it comes from neurolinguistic programming. It says the map is not the territory. So what we do with all these kind of models, they're just ways of organising our thoughts and looking at things, but they're not actually real. They're not the landscape. They're just a map that we use in order to map it. And someone's just messaged me and made a little beep, which is kind of disturbed the professional flow of my video, and also is kind of maybe a nudge that I need to practice what I preach in terms of verbal continence and say good night. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Give us a like if you liked it, subscribe if you like me, and if you like the channel. If you like the channel even more, then consider being a Patreon if you're not already, and just help us. You can just pay an American dollar a month, less than the price of a cup of tea, to help support us in improving the channel and help us make more videos, better videos, and more concise videos. Thank you very much. Rangimarie.